Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Earl.
And I'm Will Garcia.
And together we're the Hoops Guys. And we're continuing our 2014-2015 NBA season previews by talking about the Memphis Grizzlies today.
Yeah.
So tell me, Will, how'd their season go last year?
It went pretty well. And if you don't count that a Game 7 in the first round in the first couple of months of the season, it went really well. This is a team that started off kind of slow, but around the trade deadline-ish, a bit before, it really went into gear. They got that rotation worked out. They made a pretty important trade, which we'll get to later. And this was a really, really good team for about 5 months. And in the other months, they were still decent.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to win that series, the first round series against the Thunder. It went to 7 games. I would have put... actually don't have $1 in front of me right now to show it up, but I would have put... I would put 5 on it for them winning, and I would have lost my 5, but...
It would have been a worthy bet, though.
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of worthy, they were worthy offensively. They don't generally necessarily come across as like offensive dynamos.
No.
And that was kind of reflected in their offensive rating where they finished 15th.
Yep.
They were pretty much average. They were 0.4 points away from exact average from offensive rating. But they did do some offensive things very well. They were 9th at getting shots at the rim.
Yep.
First at getting shots in the paint.
Yeah.
And they converted those in the paint shots at the 6th best field goal percentage rate in the league.
Yeah, that was awesome. Another thing that was really well for them was that they took very good care of the ball. They finished 10th in turnover percentage, and they also cleaned up that offensive glass. You got, anytime you have a guy like Zach Randolph down there getting boards, it's kind of not that fair. We'll get to that later, though. But they finished 2nd in offensive rebound percentage, so that was really good for them.
Yeah, and let's be honest, regardless of how well they do offensively, this team's known for their defense.
Yeah.
And once again, they brought it, and it was reflected in their defensive rating, where they were 8th in the league.
Yeah.
And their defense was successful in large part because it forced opponents to take lower value shots, which was evidenced by their 7th place finish in defensive expected points per shot, which is a great stat measuring shot selection value by Ian Levy over at Nylon Calculus.
Yep. Link in the description on every single video.
Exactly. We love Nylon Calculus and Ian. And they also finished 10th in actual points per shot for opponents. So not only did they force opponents to take tough shots, but their opponents didn't really convert that well overall either.
Right. And one big part of those the actual points per shot value is shots at the rim. Anytime you have a guy like Marc Gasol down there and you surround him with solid perimeter defenders, you're not going to get that many shots at the rim. And funnily enough, this team was 6th at restricted area shot attempts, at reducing those. So that was a huge asset for them. And additionally, they were 8th at forcing opponents into taking mid-range shots, which analytically speaking are kind of a lower value shot.
Yeah, analytically speaking, they're viewed negatively.
Yeah, analytically speaking, it's like people would rather get punched in the throat than watch someone take a mid-range shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing that didn't leave this team getting punched in the throat is that their corner threes against this team just didn't fall, which is another big analytic thing, is preventing corner threes. And this team finished 6th at defending those.
They also did a great job at not bailing opponents out by sending them to the free throw line. They wound up 10th in opponents' free throw per field goal attempt. And they also really cracked down on opponents' second chance opportunities by really cleaning that defensive glass, winding up 8th in defensive rebound rate.
Yeah, this team has sort of, I think it's a misconception, that they play really physical, and they do play physical, as you can tell by their rebounding.
And Blake Griffin would tell you the same.
Right, but they don't play dirty.
No.
They're not
Griffin
would not tell you the same.
They're not a Detroit Bad Boys type team or a
No.
Pat Riley New York Knicks type team. No.
Right, which as you can tell by their foul rate.
Yeah.
One guy who is an outstanding piece of this team, I think he's criminally underrated.
Agreed.
It's Mike Conley. He had a bit of a breakout year. He's been doing good work for the past couple of years, but he had a real breakout year last year, dropping 17 and 6 on 45, 36, 81 shooting splits. And offense isn't even his big thing.
Nope.
He's an elite defender, and he can also shoot from the perimeter and get dribble penetration with his speed, and he's really crafty.
Yep.
So I think that he's one of the best point guards in the game, and people think I'm kind of crazy for that, but he's also just so slept on.
Yeah, he might as well change his name to like Sealy Posturpedic because he's completely slept on. I agree. I think he's perhaps the most well-rounded overall point guard in the league outside of maybe Chris Paul.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of well-rounded players in this league and on this Grizzlies team, Marc Gasol is extremely well-rounded, one of the most skilled big men in the world. He had some injury stuff near the start of the season, a knee injury that kept him out for about 23 games. But when he came back, he was the same Marc Gasol that we know and love and played really well. He finished second in the league for centers in terms of assists. The only guy above him, Will's favorite guy. Well,
yours too, Josh. You like him too.
I do too, but he's not quite my favorite guy. He's on my top 10 list, but
okay.
Noah from the Chicago Bulls. They're somewhat kindred spirits in the sense of being like defensive linchpins for their team that are also great facilitators as centers. But it wasn't just his facilitation that was good. Mark also is a really good rim protector. He doesn't really look it because he's not really that type of guy that's super athletic.
Yeah, he's not your 44-inch vert kind of guy.
Super springy type guys.
Right.
That's constantly blocking shots. But opponents only shot 51% at the rim when he was near them. Which was well below the 54% that was league average on contested shots at the rim.
Right.
So while he doesn't necessarily make SportsCenter top 10 highlights with his blocks, he is deterring shots at that rim. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned earlier that he missed some time. Well, the Grizzlies, in those 23 games that he missed, the Grizzlies were 10 and 13. So they were sub 500. When he came back, the rest of the year after he came back, they went 40 and 19. So they won at a 67.8% clip. Yeah. It really is. Say what you will about Mike Conley, Zebo, any of the rest of the guys on the team, they're all great. But Marc Gasol really is, both offensively and defensively, the guy that seems to drive that Memphis Grizzlies engine. Yeah.
But if he's driving the engine, at least his co-pilot is Zach Randolph.
Yeah.
Or he's at least like he's in the cockpit.
Yeah, he at least called shotgun.
Exactly. And for good reason. The dude averaged a double-double for his second consecutive year, putting up 17 and 11. Randolph's best asset, to me, I think at least, it's his work on the offensive glass.
Definitely.
He ranked 11th in the NBA in offensive rebound percentage and 6th in total offensive rebounds. Shout to Basketball Reference. The one downside, it's kind of the downside-ish with Randolph, is his scoring efficiency. But again, context rules everything around us.
Yarp.
And the fact that most of his shots are post-ups, which, let's not kid ourselves, a post-up is basically an ISO for a big dude.
Pretty much. And post-ups and ISOs overall are not highly efficient shots in terms of points per possession.
Exactly. And he's getting those or maybe some contested looks in the paint. So he's mostly a bailout guy. when I watch him play. Like, he's mostly like, okay, we don't have anything, and like it's 15 seconds on the shot clock, and our first option broke down. Let's take the ball to Zebo. Let's make him create something. So if you can get league average efficiency-ish, a little bit below at 51% true shooting, which isn't the best, isn't even good. It's bad, but it should be worse considering the situations that he's in.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a LaMarcus Aldridge thing.
Yeah. One guy that kind of, I think, helped open up a little more space for Zebo to operate, as well as Mike and Mark, was Courtney Lee, who was one of those trade acquisitions we mentioned earlier, where he didn't have a great three-point shooting year with the Grizzlies. He only shot 34.5% from three, but he shot 54.8% from mid-range.
Wow.
Yeah, and that provided enough of a stretch element while simultaneously being a very good man and team defender.
Mm-hmm.
He allowed the Grizzlies to introduce more floor spacing at the wing while not having a dramatic drop-off defensively by supplanting Tony Allen or Tayshaun.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. A lot of this it coincides with Marc Gasol coming back from injury. But before Courtney Lee came over to the Grizzlies, they were 15-18. And after getting Lee, they finished their last 49 games 35-14.
Yep.
So a lot of that's probably Marc Gasol coming back and being the defensive linchpin and also an offensive hub at that elbow. But I think Lee should get some credit, too, for really providing somewhat of a stretching
opening things
element
up
for that offense, which is something they've severely lacked in general over the past several years.
Yeah, they needed some Nasonex, and they were congested.
Yes.
Speaking of congested, the Grizz are often considered to be kind of a throwback team, which means they don't really shoot the most threes, kind of operating a lot of the mid-range in the post. And
Their
for better,
shot selection is congested in other terms.
A bit, yeah. And for better or worse, that whole throwback team moniker is reflected, like you said, in their shot selection. This is a team that took the 10th most mid-range jumpers, the 5th fewest shots from corner three, the fewest in the league at above the break threes, the second fewest free throws, and that's both per game and per field goal attempt. So if you want to look at it analytically or in the more box score kind of way, it still wasn't great for them to get to the line.
Yeah, with all of that in mind, though, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the Grizzlies finished dead last in expected points per shot, which once again is a measure of the value of your shot selection. But they did fare quite a bit better in terms of converting those tough shots, finishing 21st in actual points per shot.
Yeah.
Still bad. It's still bottom 10.
Like the XPPS was really, really bad, but the points per shot was just like bad. Yeah.
And there were some things that they also didn't do so well defensively. Mm-hmm. While they're viewed as a very staunch defensive team, which they are, their opponents actually shot pretty well against them this year. They were tied for 23rd in opponents' field goal percentage, and they were only 21st in terms of opponents' field goal percentage from in the paint, and 21st for opponents' mid-range field goal percentage. So, I mean, we mentioned earlier that they do a good job of forcing opponents into tough shots.
Yeah.
But opponents, at least this season, were able to hit those at a decent rate.
Yep. A guy who wasn't able to hit at a decent rate this year, and it really hurts me to say this as a Detroit fan, but Tayshaun Prince just did not look like an NBA player out there. He didn't. He finished under 35% from every area on the floor except the restricted area.
Ouch.
44% true shooting. for an NBA starter.
Yeah,
that hurts. I'm a Detroit dude. That hurts.
Yeah, but
oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah, but they are bringing in some support on the wings. One such addition they brought in this year was Vince Carter.
Yeah, half retired, half amazing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
He's 37, so you're not getting those free-sisted dunks that you're used to seeing out of Vince.
He still might be the best 37-year-old dunker, though.
He might be. But there are still, even if he can't dunk, a bunch of things. Well, he can dunk, but even if he can't dunk like he used to, there's still a bunch of stuff he can do on a basketball court. Out in Dallas, you've alluded to it as Manu Light.
Yeah.
I think it's what you said. And I think it's a good way to describe what he did out there. As kind of a perimeter shooting threat, kind of a facilitator, kind of a ball handler, doing all of those things pretty dang well out in Dallas. And I think for a team that, like we mentioned, needs a bit of Nasonex, I'm saying that because I need some Nasonex. I've got a cold.
It's contagious, Grizzlies fans.
I caught this stuffy nose from watching the Grizzlies and their paint shots. But he's going to help them out a lot in terms of spacing.
Yeah. Another wing that they brought in this offseason is actually a rookie, Jordan Adams from UCLA. He's a guy that almost everybody in the analytic community kind of pissed their pants in excitement over.
Yeah.
He was very, very efficient in a variety of ways in how he scored in college. He was able to score on the break, off ball, on ball, using ISOs and pick and rolls, and even in the post as a wing. He wasn't a particularly good deep three-point shooting threat. He only hit 35.6% of his college threes. But he does represent something that the Grizzlies really haven't had since they traded Rudy Gay, which is a shot-creating scorer on the wing.
Yeah, totally agreed.
They also brought in another rookie this year, Jarnell Stokes from Tennessee.
Yeah.
Last season, he was one of only 4 players in all of the NCAA to have an offensive rebound rate greater than 15, a defensive rebound rate greater than 20, a total rebounding rate greater than 17.5, and played in over 30 minutes a game.
Yep.
It'll be kind of tough for him to get minutes because this front court rotation is insanely good.
Yeah.
But his rebounding is only going to further reinforce and enhance the Grizzlies' glass cleaning ways.
Yeah, if there's anybody you want being mentored by Zebo or like Marc Gasol in terms of, I mean, Marc Gasol isn't commonly seen as a glass eater, but especially Zebo.
Yep.
That's Jarnell Stokes.
Definitely.
A guy who is not Jarnell Stokes is Mike Miller, and the Grizzlies lost him this year. Mike Miller played a large part in this Grizzlies team winning its 50 games. He shot hot fire.
Yeah.
And that's 46% from 3. That registers at 1.4 Dylons. That is a standard using a measurement for hot fire.
Yeah.
But in reality, his shooting and spacing ability, he's in like the upper echelon of the upper echelon. And he's crafty and he's intelligent on defense, so it can kind of mitigate the whole 6'8" white guy syndrome that people seem to think is a thing. But for him,
with a bad back,
yeah. So he works well enough as a cog in their really good defense.
They also lost another piece who he didn't really get a lot of playing time last year.
Yeah.
And it makes sense once again because it's a crazy front court rotation.
Yeah,
but
we haven't talked about Lure yet.
And we talked about him a little bit in our Lakers preview. I think he might be the best value free agent signing this offseason.
Agreed.
It was a 2-year deal at just $2 million. Like a 2-year vet minimum deal for a guy that, if you remember his stint in Toronto, is a really strong rebounder and a really capable rim protector. And I feel like he never really got a good shot in Memphis, and somewhat rightly so, just because you're talking about playing in the same big rotation as Z-Bo, Marc Gasol, Kosta Koufis, and John Lure. So that's a packed front court.
Yeah.
But, in his stint with Toronto and what I think he can do in LA, if given the opportunity, he can cook in 3 minutes and provides you with a lot of MSG, because he is what we call a ramen noodle all-star.
Exactly. So,
when do you think Mike Conley's finally going to get his due as an all-star caliber, if I can talk, caliber point guard, and probably the second best two-way point guard in the entire NBA?
The second best two-way point guard in the NBA? You've got me thinking Conley and Bledsoe. You're killing me. But in the answer
I'd take Conley over Bledsoe personally.
I would too, but it's tough.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't think he ever gets his due. And that's really sad. It hurts me to say it, but that Western Conference, if you think about all the point guards there, Dragic is technically a shooting guard, but let's face it, dude's a point guard. You have Bledsoe.
Same with Bledsoe. Yep.
You've got Russell Westbrook. You have Stephen Curry. You have CP3. You have Damian Lillard. That's 6. One of those guys, at least one, probably 2, maybe even 3 of those guys are not going to be all-stars. Yeah. Do I think that Mike Conley deserves to be on that kind of a list of really awesome point guards? Yeah. Do I think he is on that list? No, unfortunately, to most people. For him to even get on that, let alone make something like an all-star team or an all-NBA team, with how stacked, for one, the point guard crop is, and for two, it's doubly stacked in the West. I didn't even talk about guys like Ty Lawson.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he ever gets his due, or at least for a long time, or some dudes move in free agency or get traded.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. I think you're awesome.
We both think you're awesome, Mike.
Speaking of guys we think are pretty awesome, I think that Courtney Lee, Vince Carter, and Quincy Pondexter, personally, I think they're pretty awesome. Do you think that they're going to provide the Grizzlies with enough consistent three-point shooting from the wings to open things up for guys like Mark and Z-Bo?
Well, all three of them have had years in the past that suggest they can be really capable three-point threats that the defense has to give credence to. Courtney Lee, he's a career 38.2% three-point shooter and has had multiple years over 40%.
Yeah.
Vince is a career 37.8% three-point shooter, and the last 2 years with Dallas, he's shot over 39% both years. And Quincy, right now he's a 35.9% career three-point shooter.
He's all right.
In his last more fuller year with the Grizzlies, 2012, 2013, he shot a promising 39.5%.
That's really good. Yeah.
And that was the highest sample size for him so far in his NBA career at 152 threes attempted that year. So hopefully between the three of those guys, they'll be able to give the Grizzlies something they've kind of lacked for a long time. They've had guys like Mike Miller before, John Lure, guys who can do it, but they haven't really had a group of guys who can all present a threat from three to the defense. So I think those guys can really help space the floor and make it a little easier on Mark, Z-Bo, and Mike to help drive this team potentially deep in the playoffs.
I agree with that entirely. So I don't really have much more to say about it. You got one for me?
Yeah. Do you think the Grizzlies are going to actually... We talked already about how tough that Western Conference is, all-star vote-wise and reserve-wise. on the roster this year, considering in this entire franchise's history, they've only had 3.
Yeah.
Pau, Marc, and Z-Bo.
I'm trying to think if there's another one, but you're right.
Nope, it's just those 3.
You're right.
I think Z-Bo made it twice, but yeah, just 4 times in entire franchise history.
See, I thought Jason Williams might have made it for them, but no, he didn't.
Nope.
I think so. I think it's very possible. I think there's a strong possibility. Mike Conley could and probably should make it, but probably won't. But when you have Z-Bo, who's highly respected now, I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's amazing. I always thought he was a good dude, but now,
I grew up
he's getting his due.
in the Jailblazer era, so I'm not quite sure how to take Z-Bo.
Well, people change. Plus, Marc Gasol, who is, I think, the best center in the Western Conference. With those 3 guys, particularly the 2 bigs, I think one of them could easily make it in.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Grizzlies have a good record this year leading into the All-Star break and Marc getting the call.
Yep. Agreed. Speaking of getting the call, do you think that the GMs for other teams are going to be calling up for Costa Koufos?
Yeah, I think Costa is definitely going to be the subject of many other GMs' secret desires as a rim protector. Not so sure he gets moved, though.
I can agree on that with Costa.
There's something really, really awesome about being able to have a not that significant drop-off from elite defensive linchpin and rim protection. It's nice not having that crater completely when your main guy is
you can ask
on the
Rockets
bench,
fans about that.
In foul trouble or injured.
Mm-hmm.
So having a guy like Costa, who's a really good team defender and a really good rim protector, it's beneficial. Somewhat similar to Ian Mahinmi behind Roy Hibbert.
Or even Omer Ashik, what he did for the Rockets.
Yeah, and Omer Ashik obviously behind Dwight Howard and then previously behind Noah with the Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
There's something extremely beneficial to having a platoon of really strong defensive linchpin type guys, and Costa isn't nearly as good in that regard as Marc is, but few people are.
Yeah.
But he's a decent enough approximation where that defense is going to completely crater when Marc goes to the bench.
Exactly.
So I don't think they'll get calls on Costa, but unless something crazy is offered, I don't think he'll be moved.
I think that's a pretty accurate thing of what's going to probably wind up happening.
Yeah. Maybe not quite as accurate, but something potentially in the ether. What happens if the Grizzlies don't have a great postseason showing this year? What if, who knows, maybe they go out in the first round again? Is this going to be, if that happens, will this next offseason see the actual breakup of the Mike, Marc, Z-Bo, Tony core?
I don't know. I think I would be very devastated, and I'm not even that personally invested, but I would be devastated if Z-Bo left, because that's his home, man.
Yeah,
they took him. It's like the redemption story. It'd be sad, but it could happen. Marc Gasol, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he move with Pau to Memphis and kind of grew up there as a teenager?
He played high school basketball in Memphis before then going back over to Spain to play professionally before he came over to the NBA.
Right on. So he's been walking in Memphis like Mark Cohn for quite some time.
Yeah, I don't know if they make blue suede shoes in Marc's size, but if they do, I wouldn't be surprised if he had some. One thing to note, though, is Marc is going to be a free agent this offseason. He's going to be one of the top guys on everybody's list.
There are going to be a bunch of calls and a bunch of offers for this guy because it's such a unique skill set and he's so elite at it. So someone might come out swinging with like a max deal or a near
which
max.
I don't think Memphis would balk at giving Marc the max. And it's funny because Tony and Zebo signed a 2-year extension earlier this offseason. So him and Tony are locked up through 2017. Mike is locked up through 2016.
Yep.
So Marc is the only one who's kind of somewhat available in the short term. But like we said, he kind of grew up in Memphis. Like outside of Spain, Memphis is his home. Yeah. So, and I think he loves his teammates. I think he loves the city. I can't really see him, even if some team was like, we'll do everything you want. We'll pay you the max. We'll even pay you stuff under the table and risk getting screwed over if the NBA finds out. I still don't think he leaves.
No, it's just Akron away from Akron.
Yeah, I think he's a Grizzly for life.
I agree, yeah. And I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of cool, hopefully you think our 2050-80 is cool. It's essentially, hope so. We give a prediction that we think is 20% likely, 50% likely, and 80% likely to happen. 20% lets us say crazy shit. 80% let us say stuff that makes sense. 50% somewhere in the middle. Josh, what are your predictions like, man?
So I think it's 20% likely, but not really 20% likely. This is more something I think would be cool to see happen as opposed to an actual prediction.
Okay.
But,
it's a cop-out.
Yes, it's an extreme cop-out, but screw it. I would love to see the two best front courts in all the land meet in the finals for a defensive duel death match. Supreme.
70-point games, man!
Yeah! We're talking Bulls, Grizzlies.
That'd be cool.
The television viewing audience would probably hate it, but it would be very fun, at least to me, to see some of those storylines in there. You know, Noah against Marc. Once again, kind of somewhat kindred spirits in the sense that they're defensive linchpins who are also killer facilitators.
And they would make an awesome buddy cop movie.
Offensively and defensively to their teams. You've got the Pau Gasol, Marc Gasol, Pau coming back to Memphis storyline. You got Mike Conley D'ing up D Rose,
who would probably do a better job than Derrick Rose would. No knock on Derrick Rose, but that'd be a really cool opportunity for Mike Conley to get some shine.
Yeah, and you know, it would just be a lot of fun watching Taj Gibson trying to defend Zebo, for instance.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That, like I said, it's a straight cop-out. It's true, but it would be fun to watch, I think.
I think so, too.
Yeah. For a real prediction, I think it's 50% likely that the Memphis Grizzlies have home court advantage in the first round in the Western Conference.
Man. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree, but that's pretty bold.
To me, there are only two teams who are guaranteed locks to be top 4 in the West, and that's the Spurs and the Clippers. The Thunder, KD's out for a while, and we don't really know how long he's going to be out. They're still going to be a really good team, but are they going to be top 4 good?
Yeah, if it knocks them back like 6 or 7 games.
Yeah.
Boom. There goes now you're a 6th seed.
Yeah, and there are some other teams like the Mavs and the Blazers who could be in that discussion too, but I think the Grizzlies, especially when you look at what they did after Courtney Lee came and after Marc was healthy again, I think they got slept on last year, and I think assuming they're healthy for the most part this year, I think they can get into that top 4 in the West.
Right on.
Yeah. That said, it's tough in the West, so 50-50.
Yeah.
I think it's 80, and I already mentioned this, but I think it's 80% likely, and more like 95% likely, that Marc Gasol re-signs with the Grizzlies on a max deal this offseason.
Yeah.
He's not going anywhere.
Nope. I agree with that.
Speaking of not going anywhere, we're not going anywhere until Will says his 20-50-80.
Right on. And speaking of the opposite of not going anywhere, I think that's 20% likely that the Grizzlies make the Western Conference Finals. And I know that sounds a little low, but in reality, I mean, look at all the teams that are going to have to go past. Yep. You know, even if they do make like a top 4 seed, okay, they'd be going up against a team like the Spurs or the Clippers in the second round.
Yep.
So to win 2 series against 8 50-win teams, essentially, or 2 of 8 50-win teams, that's always really rough. But I think that the Grizz, they're as solid as pretty much anyone. So I think that they could make it.
Yeah, I concur.
I think it's 50% likely that Marc Gasol leads all big men in assists per game. Joakim Noah is like the typical kind of, but Joakim Noah got the most assists last year. Yeah, Joakim Noah was used like a point guard last year. Now they have an actual point guard. His name's Derrick Rose.
Yeah, and Rose is going to have that ball.
Yes, he is. Kevin Love is another example. Oh, well, Kevin Love got a bunch of assists off of outlet passes. And like, okay, fair enough, but now they have LeBron and Kyrie Irving.
True, he should get a lot of outlet passes, but he's not going to be playing with as much of a cherry picker as he did in Minnesota.
Exactly.
Shout out to Vivek.
Yeah. So I think that Marc Gasol could easily drop like 15, 8, and 5.
Yeah, I think it's within the realm of possibility.
You know, or like 4.8.
Yeah.
And people lose it when they see 5, but 4.8.
Yes.
So I think that it's 80% likely. Actually, I think that it's 100% likely, and it might even happen in those comments down below, that I get into an internet argument with somebody over whether or not Mike Conley is an elite NBA point guard.
That's a given.
It's going to happen. I don't see what separates this guy from, and, you know, leave your comment and we can turn this prediction into a reality. I don't see what separates a guy like Conley from a guy like Derrick Rose or a guy like Russell Westbrook. Steph, okay, I get it, but a guy like Lillard, a guy like John Wall, I'd take Conley over a couple of those guys. Yeah, and I'd have to think about the rest of them.
Honestly, if it really came down to it, the only guys I would for certain personally take over Conley would be Chris Paul and Steph.
Yep. I'd be thinking really hard about Goran Dragic.
I mean, there's a lot that you'd have to consider, but on a overall well-rounded perspective, and especially if you value defense highly, it's hard to overlook Mike Conley.
Yeah, Mike Conley is as good on defense as pretty much anybody is on offense, and he's better on offense than most people are on defense.
Yeah.
So that's why I think he's great. Speaking of great, do you think this team's going to be great?
Does a grizzly bear in the woods?
I think a grizzly bear does in the woods.
Yes, they're going to be really good.
I think so too, and I think it's fair to call this team a dark horse contender. A team that could, I think so. You know, they've taken the Spurs to 7 before. They've taken the Thunder to 7, and I think that now that everyone's hopefully going to be healthy, and now they added in Vince Carter, I think that's a nice addition. And Mike Conley is continuing to improve. So I think that if you can take teams like San Antonio and Oklahoma City to 7, and come really, really close.
And obviously, you know, unfortunately, they lost last year, but it was a game 7 in the first round.
And I'm pretty sure they were up 3-2.
Yeah.
If I remember it correctly. So, yeah, this is a team that can make the finals.
Yeah. It's possible.
It's possible. If it's popsicle, it's possible. I remember those commercials. They were fun. Speaking of fun, I think it's been really fun. So I think that wraps up our preview. But before we cut this off, Josh, do you have any final words?
Nope. Just going to be fun watching Mike, Mark, and Zebo do some good work for the Grizzlies this year.
Absolutely. Speaking of good work, if you thought this was good work, give it a thumbs up. If you thought it wasn't good work, give it a thumbs down. Like I give a thumbs down to Tayshaun Prince's shooting last year. Come on, dude, pick it up. Leave a comment if you want to get into an internet argument with me over Mike Conley, or if you have some ideas for future videos, or if you want to leave your thoughts about the Grizzlies in general. And if you like this video, also consider hitting that subscribe button down below, and that'll keep you notified of all of our future videos, and maybe even go back and watch some of our previous ones. So I think we're out, Josh. Any final words before we wrap this thing up?
Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.
Peace out, guys.